fire was still alive. When the clan stirred, a thin line of smoke drifted upward as the oldest woman leaned forward, placing small sticks onto the glowing embers. She pressed her hands close, warming them before beginning her work of feeding the flames. Nearby, a boy rubbed sleep from his eyes and stretched. His father handed him a piece of dried meat from the pile saved the night before. It was tough, but the boy chewed slowly, knowing it would keep him steady until more food was found. 2 of the men walked away from the camp, carrying spears. They were not hunting yet, only checking the traps they had laid along the river. With them went a younger girl, carrying an empty basket. She watched carefully, learning the path and the signs her elders followed. At the camp, others began sorting the tools. A cracked stone blade was replaced. Fibers were twisted into rope, pulled tight, and tied around a spearhead. Every hand found its place. Some mended, some cleaned. Some prepared for the day's work ahead. No words were wasted. A nod or a glance was enough. Everyone knew what to do. The old woman, satisfied that the fire was alive for another day, picked up a flat stone and began grinding. She had gathered seeds the day before and now pressed them into a rough paste. The sound was steady, stone against stone, and the smell of crushed grain rose faintly. She worked slowly, stopping every so often to stretch her fingers before starting again. 2 children sat nearby, watching her hands. She gave them each a few seeds and gestured for them to try. The children laughed as the seeds scattered instead of crushing, but she showed them again, her hands calm, her movements patient. A man squatted by a spear, running his fingers along the shaft to feel for splinters. He smoothed them away with a stone flake, then checked the cord that held the tip in place. When it loosened, he unwound it and began again, pulling the fibers tight with his teeth before tying them firmly. Another man knelt near the edge of camp, carving a small bone into a needle. He scraped carefully, blowing away the dust, then tested the point on his fingertip. Not sharp enough. He went back to work, steady and precise. The girl with the basket returned first. She carried only a few fish caught in the traps, but she held them carefully, proud of her find. The others came behind her, one with a rabbit, another with empty hands. The traps did not always give, but even little was enough. The fish were laid beside the fire. One woman began cleaning them, using a flake of stone to slice along their bellies. She tossed the insides aside for the birds and rinsed the flesh in a bowl of water. The boy who had been chewing meat earlier now watched, leaning forward to see how it was done. She let him try with the smallest fish, guiding his hand so the cut was straight and clean. As the morning went on, the camp grew busier. Bark was stripped from branches to weave into a new basket. Thin strips of hide were scraped smooth for later use. Children played close to the fire, stacking small stones into towers, knocking them down, and laughing. The hunters who had returned empty-handed sat together, repairing their traps with fresh twine. They worked without frustration, knowing they would try again the next day. One of them hummed softly, a tune that rose and fell without words. Another joined in, tapping a rhythm against his knee. When the sun rose higher, The clan gathered what food they had. Each person received a share. The children ate quickly, the adults more slowly, saving enough for later. Nothing was wasted. Even the bones would be used, the skins dried, the ashes spread. The fire crackled steadily. Tools were laid in piles, baskets filled, and the morning's work continued without hurry. It was only the start of the day, and already the clan had done what needed to be done. Tending the fire, checking the traps, mending what was broken, teaching the young, sharing what they had. The morning passed not with great events, but with the quiet rhythm of hands moving, tools scraping, and tasks repeated, just as they had been the day before, and just as they would be tomorrow. The sun rose higher, and the clan prepared to leave the camp. Some carried baskets, others carried spears. The fire was not left unguarded. The oldest woman stayed behind with 2 children, keeping the embers alive and continuing her work with the tools. The foragers walked in a line, moving at a steady pace. At the front, an elder led the way, pointing out paths he had walked many times before. His eyes moved across the ground more than the sky. He stopped at broken stems, paw prints in mud, and the scattered droppings, showing the signs to those behind him. The younger ones leaned forward to see, storing each mark in memory. They reached a patch of bushes heavy with berries. The group spread out, hands moving quickly to fill baskets. Some tasted the fruit first, spitting out the sour or bitter ones. The children copied this, laughing when their mouths puckered. An older woman corrected them gently, showing which berries were safe and which were not to be touched at all. While the gatherers worked, 2 men set snares along a trail. They bent thin branches into loops, anchoring them with stones. Their movements were practiced, silent, efficient. One boy crouched nearby, watching carefully as the knots were tied. He would try later when his hands were stronger. Farther along, another group knelt by the riverbank. They waded in, feeling with their feet for fish caught in the shallows. A spear was lowered slowly into the water, then thrust forward in a sharp motion. The fish twisted and splashed, but soon lay still. The group pulled it from the spear and laid it into a basket. By midday, the baskets were heavier. Roots, berries, nuts, and a few fish had been collected. The clan turned back toward the camp, walking slower now under the weight of their loads. The old woman had kept the fire alive, as expected. Smoke still rose, and her grinding stone rested at her side. She looked up as the others returned, her eyes moving quickly across what they carried. The food was laid down, and work began again. Some roasted fish on sharpened sticks, holding them over the flames. Others cracked nuts with stones, sharing the pieces between children. The younger ones ate quickly, licking their fingers, while the adults ate more slowly, passing pieces to those who had less. After eating, the clan rested in the shade. Some lay back with eyes closed. Others sat quietly, sharpening tools or smoothing wood. The children played a simple game, throwing small stones at a target and laughing when one struck true. The older boys turned the game into practice, testing their aim with spears against a stump. The rest was brief. When the food was gone, when the tools were ready, When the shade had cooled them, the clan began again. Some returned to the river, others searched deeper for roots. The day's work did not end at eating. It continued, steady and unbroken, because tomorrow would need food as much as today. When the sun began to sink, the clan returned to camp. The baskets were not as heavy as before, but enough had been gathered for the evening meal. Roots and berries were set down, and fish were placed by the fire. The old woman tended the flames again, feeding them with dry wood, so the fire would burn bright into the night. She gave a spark of the fire to a younger girl, showing her how to fan the embers and place the sticks. The girl's first attempts smoked and sputtered, but with a patient hand guiding hers, the flames caught. A cheer rose from the children who had been watching. The meal was cooked and eaten slowly. Each person received their share. One boy passed part of his portion to his sister when she dropped hers into the dirt. No one scolded her. It was simply given and received. After the eating, the work shifted. The firelight grew stronger as the sky darkened. Around it, the clan gathered, their tasks quieter now. One man polished the edge of a spear. Another woman plucked fibers from a strip of bark, twisting them into cord. The children sat close together, their faces lit orange by the flames. Then the stories began. It was not a single voice, nor words as we know them. The oldest man rose and moved his arms, his body acting out the hunt of a great animal. He stamped his feet to mimic its weight, lowered his head to show its horns. He thrust his spear into the ground with a shout, and the children gasped and clapped. A younger hunter added to the tale, taking the part of the prey. He bounded around the fire, hands raised like antlers. The laughter grew, and the children joined in, chasing him in circles until he fell down with a dramatic cry. They piled onto him, triumphant. When the laughter settled, another story began. This one slower, told by a woman who traced shapes in the dirt with a stick. She drew the curve of the river, the path of the hills, and the marks of where food could be found. The younger ones leaned forward, memorizing the map made of lines. She pointed to the stars above, and then to her drawings, connecting the sky to the earth. A boy asked a question with a gesture, pointing to the fire and then to the sky. The old woman answered not with words, but by lifting a burning stick and waving it in an arc, showing how the fire's sparks rose like the stars. The children stared upward, their eyes wide. The rhythm of the camp grew slower. Some tapped sticks against logs in a steady beat, and others clapped their hands to match. The sound was simple, but it carried into the night, rising and falling with the firelight. One by one, the younger children curled beside their parents, eyes closing to the warmth of the flames. The elders sat longer, keeping the fire alive, their voices low and steady as they spoke to each other in quiet tones. The day ended as the stories did, not with silence, but with a hum of voices, the crackle of fire, and the feeling of being together. As darkness settled, the fire became the center of everything. Its light reached only so far, and beyond it, the trees faded into shadow. The clan drew closer, some lying down, others sitting upright, with spears resting across their knees. 2 men took the first watch. They sat at the edge of the fire's glow, listening to the night. Their eyes scanned the darkness, their hands steady on their weapons. They spoke little, only short gestures when one heard something the other had not. Most nights passed quietly, and still they watched. Closer to the flames, the old woman spread skins for the children. One by one, they lay down, pulling hides over their shoulders. A girl curled against her mother's side. A boy lay on his back, staring up until the stars blurred and his eyelids closed. The smallest child shifted restlessly until a hand rested on his chest, steadying his breath. The hunters who had failed to catch much that day sharpened their tools once more before laying them aside. They knew tomorrow would bring the same tasks again. There was no anger, only a quiet acceptance that each day gave what it would. From time to time, someone stirred the fire, adding a branch so the flames would not fall too low. Sparks rose into the air, floating upward until they disappeared. The children had already compared them to the stars, but even the adults glanced upward when the sparks flew, as though remembering the story told earlier. The drumming and laughter of the evening faded, replaced by low humming. A woman rocked slightly as she held a child, her voice soft and unbroken, repeating the same sound until the child's breathing slowed. One of the men on watch returned briefly, crouching near the fire to warm his hands. He picked up a stick and drew in the dirt. The shape of an animal, the curve of a path, marks for water and shelter. A boy, half asleep, noticed and smiled faintly before drifting off again. The man erased the drawing with his palm before returning to his post. As the night deepened, silence grew. The fire burned lower, though always alive. The guards shifted their weight, eyes fixed on the dark, while the rest of the clan slept in small groups. Some slept on their sides. Some curled tightly. Others stretched long, trusting the warmth of the flames. The night passed not with events, but with breathing, with the steady crack of the fire, with the turning of the earth. The clan slept, and woke, and slept again, until the sky at last began to pale. The first light touched the camp, and the clan stirred once more. The fire, tended through the night, still smoldered. The old woman breathed life into it again, feeding it until the flames rose. This morning, the clan did not prepare baskets for gathering. Instead, the hunters lifted their spears, and others carried heavy wooden poles. The signs of game had been clear the day before, and today they would follow them. The children stayed behind with 2 women and the elder. They were given small tasks, fetching water from the river, gathering dry sticks, watching over the food that remained. Their work kept them busy, but their eyes often drifted to the trees, wishing to see what the others might find. The hunting party moved in silence, their steps practiced and light. The elder hunter led the way, pointing to tracks pressed into the earth. They followed the marks until they came to a clearing where deer grazed. The hunters crouched low. Poles were planted in the ground, forming a rough barrier. Not enough to trap, but enough to guide. Slowly, the hunters spread out, surrounding the deer. Each one moved carefully, waiting for the signal. A sharp cry rang out, and the hunters rushed forward. The deer scattered, some fleeing into the forest, but one was forced toward the barrier. Spears were raised and thrown. The animal fell, kicking hard against the ground until it stilled. The hunters gathered around it. No one cheered. Instead, they worked quickly, cutting the hide, draining the blood, separating the meat. The strongest carried the bulk of the body across their shoulders for the long walk back. Others carried the hide and bones, knowing each part had its use. Back at camp, the children ran to meet them. The sight of the animal was met with wide eyes and quiet awe. The old woman nodded once, then began preparing her tools for scraping the hide. The meat was divided. Strips were set aside to roast immediately, others to dry in the smoke for later. Bones were placed near the fire, ready to be split for marrow. Nothing was left unused. As the food cooked, one of the hunters knelt with the children. He showed them how the tracks had led to the clearing, how the poles had turned the animal's path, how patience had made the kill possible. The children copied his movements in the dirt, replaying the hunt with sticks as spears. The meal that followed was larger than usual. The clan ate until full, then worked together to prepare what remained for storage. The old woman stretched the hide across a frame, scraping it with a stone tool. Another shaped a bone into a sharper point. The air was filled with the sounds of cutting, scraping, chewing, and teaching. As the day passed, the camp was busy in a different way than before. Yesterday had been gathering. Today had been the hunt. Both were part of the same rhythm, each as necessary as the other. The sun lowered again, and the camp grew quiet after the day's work. The deer had been taken apart, its pieces spread across many hands. Some strips of meat smoked slowly above the fire. The hide stretched tight on its frame, drying as it was scraped. Bones had already been split for marrow, their hollow pieces set aside for tools. When the evening meal was shared, it was larger than usual. Children ate until their stomachs were round, and even the elders took more than their normal share. For a time, the camp was filled only with the sound of chewing and the crackle of the fire. Afterward, when hunger was gone, the people shifted closer to the flames. The hunters sat together, the others watching as they began to retell the day. The oldest hunter took a spear and pressed its point into the dirt, dragging a line to show the path the deer had taken. His hand swept wide to show the spread of the herd, then narrowed to show how one had been turned toward the poles. His voice rose and fell, broken by gestures. Another hunter added to the tale, standing to act out the moment of the throw. He lifted his spear, pulled it back, and drove it forward with a sharp cry. The children shouted in excitement, spears of sticks raised in imitation. When the story was finished, the old woman approached the stretched hide. With a stone dipped in ash, she marked a line across the skin. A simple line, sharp and dark, nothing more. The others watched silently. The mark was not a picture, not a full story, but it was a reminder. It would stay as long as the hide stayed. Later, as the fire burned higher, The rhythm changed. Hands clapped, sticks struck logs, voices hummed in low tones. The sounds rose together, steady and slow, until they became a chant. The children clapped too, though not always in time, their faces bright in the firelight. The night carried on like this, with food, with story, with rhythm. The deer was gone, but its presence lingered in the telling, in the hide stretched by the fire, in the fullness of every stomach. When the chanting faded, the camp grew quiet again. Some lay back, already drifting to sleep. The guards took their places, spears in hand, watching the dark. The fire cracked and sparked. Above, the stars were countless. The clan slept, but the story of the hunt remained, carried forward by memory, by marks in the dirt, by the line across the hide. Tomorrow would bring new tasks, but tonight belonged to the deer. At dawn, the clan did not prepare baskets or spears. Instead, they prepared to leave. The river near the camp had grown low, and the traps no longer gave much food. The land had been walked many times, and the hunters had seen fewer tracks. It was time to move. The old woman banked the fire, pressing the embers into a clay bowl. She covered them with ash so they would travel safely without dying. Fire was too precious to leave behind. The people gathered what they owned. Skins were folded, cords tied into bundles, tools wrapped carefully to keep from breaking. A boy carried a basket filled with flint. A girl carried dried strips of meat. Even the children helped, each holding something small. The hunters lifted the heavier loads, poles, hides, and the long frame of the drying rack. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was left except the marks in the dirt and the scraps of bone too small to carry. They walked in a long line, the elder at the front. His eyes searched for signs of water and shelter. The path wound through trees, across open ground, and up a ridge. Along the way, the children lagged, stopping to pick up stones or point at birds, until a parent pulled them forward again. By midday, they reached another river, wider than the first. Fish darted in the shallows, and tall reeds grew thick along the bank. The hunters tested the ground, finding it firm enough for sleep. The elder nodded once, and the clan began their work. Poles were pushed into the earth. Skins were stretched across them, forming shelters. The children gathered reeds for bedding. The hunters checked the water for signs of animals, already planning where traps could be set. The fire was placed in the center, its embers tipped carefully into a new circle of stones. The flames caught, rising again from the ash. The old woman fed it until it burned strong. By evening, the camp was whole again. The river ran beside them, the shelters stood, and the fire gave warmth as before. The day had been long, but no different in its purpose: to move, to build, to live. The clan ate simply that night, chewing dried meat and nuts carried from the old camp. There was no hunt, no gathering, only the quiet work of settling. Still, as the stars rose, a boy asked for a story. The elder told one, not of the day, but of long ago, of the first fire, of the first river, of the first time people moved and made camp again. The children listened, their eyes heavy with sleep. The new camp settled into silence, and the fire burned steady, Tomorrow would bring fresh ground to walk, new food to find, new signs to read. But tonight was only rest. The sun was high when two hunters spotted movement beyond the reeds. It was not a deer or a boar. The shapes were upright, walking slowly along the far bank of the river. They froze. Their hands tightened around their spears. The figures across the water stopped as well. There were 4 of them, 3 adults and a child. They too carried spears. For a long moment, no one moved. Only the river flowed between them. One of the hunters gave a low call, a sound the clan used when danger was near. Back at camp, others lifted their heads, then hurried to the river's edge. Soon, both groups faced each other across the water. The elder of the clan stepped forward. He raised one hand, palm open. It was a gesture of peace, one that needed no words. Across the river, the tallest of the strangers slowly did the same. The child on the far bank hid behind her mother's leg. The mother whispered to her, then looked back at the clan. Her face was cautious, but not hostile. Minutes passed in silence. Then the elder pointed to the river, then to the fish that darted below the surface. He mimed the action of catching one. He wanted the strangers to see they came for food, not for fighting. The tall stranger nodded. He bent down, picked up a stone, and tossed it lightly into the water. Ripples spread. It was not a threat, only a sign of understanding. Carefully, the elder stepped into the shallows. He placed his spear on the ground, leaving it behind him. Across the river, the tall man did the same. Both waded forward until the water reached their knees. They stopped, only a few paces apart, the river still between them. The elder reached into his pouch and pulled out a small piece of dried meat. He held it up, then dropped it onto a flat stone in the water. The stranger watched, then pulled a shell necklace from his neck. He placed it gently beside the meat. Neither man touched the other's gift. They stepped back to their own banks. The children in both groups whispered and stared. The women pulled them close, watchful. The hunters gripped their spears, but did not lift them. As the sun lowered, the strangers turned away. They walked along the bank until the reeds swallowed them. The clan stood in silence, watching until no movement remained. That night, around the fire, the clan spoke more than usual. The children asked many questions. Who were they? Would they return? Were they friends? Were they enemies? The elder only said, "Others walk the land. We are not alone." The fire crackled. The clan slept uneasily, dreaming of the faces on the far bank. The next morning, the hunters checked the river traps and found little. The fish had slipped free, or perhaps the water was too disturbed. The clan ate what they could, but it was not enough. By midday, the strangers returned. This time they came more openly, stepping from the trees and standing on the far bank. The tall man held his spear, but the tip pointed to the ground. Behind him, the woman carried something wrapped in leaves. The elder called to the clan. Together they walked to the water's edge. Again, the elder raised his hand, palm open. The tall man did the same. The woman stepped forward and unwrapped her bundle. Inside were roots, thick and pale, still damp with earth. She set them down on a rock and waited. The old woman of the clan whispered to the elder. She knew these roots. They were good for boiling, filling the belly when meat was scarce. The elder nodded. He turned, and one of the hunters brought forward a strip of dried deer meat. The elder placed it on another rock, across from the roots. Both groups waited. Slowly, the tall man picked up the meat. The elder picked up the roots. No one moved to strike. The trade was done. The children on both sides leaned forward, curious. One boy held out a carved bone pendant. He tossed it gently onto the stone in the river. Across the water, the other child laughed and tossed back a small polished pebble, smooth and red. The adults watched, but did not stop them. For a time, the group stood and exchanged small things: a shell for a feather, a stone flake for a string of beads, roots for meat. No words were shared, only gestures, but the meaning was clear. When the sun began to fall, the strangers backed away. They lifted their hands once more, then vanished into the reeds. The clan carried the roots back to camp. The old woman boiled them in a skin bag filled with water and heated with stones from the fire. Soon, the smell filled the air. The children chewed the soft, starchy food, and their hunger eased. That night, the clan spoke of the trade. Some were glad, saying the strangers had brought life to their fire. Others were wary, warning that gifts could also bring danger. The elder listened but said little. He only looked toward the river, where the reeds swayed in the dark. The clan slept, their bellies full, but their dreams restless. The following day broke with mist over the river. The camp stirred slowly, the clan chewing the last of the roots from the strangers. Their bellies were steady, but the hunters knew more food was needed. By mid-morning, voices carried across the water. The strangers had returned, this time with more than gifts. The tall man pointed beyond the trees, mimed the leap of an animal, and held his spear high. His meaning was clear. A hunt. Together. The elder hesitated. The clan murmured. To hunt beside others was a risk, but the meat they had was nearly gone, and the strangers had offered food without bloodshed. Finally, the elder nodded. He picked up his own spear and gestured for 2 hunters to follow. The 2 groups met where the river narrowed to stones. They crossed carefully, the water cold around their legs, until they stood side by side for the first time. Faces were studied closely now, scars on skin, paint smudged on cheeks, beads tied in hair. They were different, yet not so different. The tall man grunted once and led them into the trees. His group moved swiftly, their eyes sharp, their steps silent. The clan's hunters mirrored them, signaling with hands. Crouching low, and tracks appeared in the dirt. Deer. Fresh. The hunters spread out, forming a half circle. Each group had its own rhythm, its own calls, but slowly they began to match one another. A glance replaced a sound. A gesture replaced a word. The deer grazed in a clearing, heads down, unaware. The tall man lifted his spear. Across the circle, the elder did the same. At once, the hunters rushed forward. Spears flew, striking with force. The deer bolted, but the trap was closed. One fell, pierced through the flank. Another staggered. A spear lodged in its side. The hunters gave chase, their cries echoing through the trees. At last, the animals lay still. The hunt was done. The men gathered around the kill, their chests heaving, sweat on their brows. For a long moment, they only looked at one another. Then slowly, the tall man smiled. He pressed his hand to the elder's shoulder. The elder did the same. Together, they skinned the deer. The meat was divided with care, half for one group, half for the other. The hides were shared as well, each side carrying away what would cover bodies, line shelters, or bind tools. Nothing was wasted. Back at the camp, the smell of roasted meat filled the air. The clan feasted with more than they had eaten in many days. Even the smallest child chewed until his belly was round. Laughter carried across the fire, louder than before. For hunger had loosened every voice. The strangers came again, not to hunt, but to sit. They formed a circle by the fire. The old woman brought out beads and shells, showing them how cords were tied. The strangers brought painted stones, red and black, and pressed them into the children's hands. Stories followed, not words that could be shared, but gestures, shapes traced in the dirt, and sounds that rose like the calls of animals. The children laughed and copied, their small hands smudged with color. The night stretched long. For once, the fire burned not for warmth alone, but for the company it held. When dawn came, the strangers rose. They packed their hides and spears. The tall man looked across the river, then back at the elder. He lifted his hand one last time. The elder returned to the gesture. Nothing more was said. The strangers crossed the stones and vanished into the reeds, their forms swallowed by mist. The clan watched in silence. They had met, traded, hunted, and lived a little stronger because of it. The river ran steady. The fire still burned, and the land waited. The clan turned back to their camp. A new day began.